Chandler Smith will not return to Joe Gibbs Racing in 2025, but does have a ride lined up for 2025. NASCAR has filed a response to the lawsuit from 2011 in Front Row Motorsports, and Rich Schultz Racing announces crew chief shakeups and they will run a third car in 2025. What's going on, guys? It's Daniel, and welcome back to our video. We got some NASCAR and other motorsports stories discussed here today on the channel. Let's go ahead and just jump straight into those really quickly. We've only got one paint scheme to take a look at, and it's Kyle Larson's 2025 HendrickCars.com scheme. Nothing has changed with the scheme prior to 2024 except there are painted blue side skirts on the car, which I've got to say, that's a really nice touch to the car. Honestly, I think the HendrickCars.com was one of the more iconic schemes in recent years. I think it does look pretty solid. I think did a really great and solid job on it, and I'm definitely looking forward to seeing on the racetrack in 2025. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about NASCAR growth. As it was reported by Adam Stern on Friday, that NASCAR in the past year, NASCAR has shown signs of audience growth in the U.S. It is up 1 million on Instagram, which is a 41% increase from 2023, and it's also up 14% on TikTok and YouTube. NASCAR has definitely been growing here in the United States, especially. Obviously on Instagram, NASCAR has grown quite a bit. A lot of course, the big popular companies like Bleacher Report, who are starting to work now with NASCAR a lot more closely for the 2025 year, have been posting some of NASCAR's big iconic moments that happened in 2024, like the last lap pass by Tyler Reddick on the outside, the multiple photo finishes like at Texas between Ryan Sieg and Sam Mayer, also of course some of the other things we saw like the great finish between Chris Buescher and Kyle Larson, and the three-wide photo finish between Daniel Suarez, Kyle Busch, and Ryan Blaney. NASCAR is definitely stalemated in certain areas, but one of the big things that NASCAR has done a solid job on is growing on social media, and I hope that going forward into the future, the NASCAR can continue to grow on social media and the sport can last for the long-term future, because the longer the sport can last, the better it is going to be for everybody involved, so the sport can last for a very long time. Glad to see the NASCAR is growing on social media across all platforms. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about FDNY Racing. As it was reported on Friday that FDNY Racing will be running the NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series race at Lime Rock Park. It is also expected that this team will have an announcement later today in regards to their 2025 plans. Most likely they're going to be announcing their driver, not just for Lime Rock, but they're probably also going to be announcing their driver for Daytona as well. FDNY Racing has been on the racetrack for many, many years. Brian Dozy usually drives behind the wheel of the truck. They are looking for someone that's going to bring funding and sponsorship to the team for 2025, and it's good to see that this organization will be showing up for the 2025 year. While this team hasn't always been the fastest team in the NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series, you want to see organizations come back to the sport and be very, very successful. And I want to see a team like FDNY Racing have the chance and opportunity to be really successful in this sport. So I'm glad to see that they are officially coming back in the 2025 calendar year, even as just for one event, even though, like I said, I do expect that FDNY Racing will run more races, but I think this is the first time that they've ran a road course in a very long time. So excited to see that they'll be running the Lime Rock Park Truck Series race in late June to early July. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about the Abu Dhabi Grand Prix. So on Sunday, the Abu Dhabi Grand Prix took place, which is the final race for many things. Lewis Hamilton, of course, being a Mercedes before he heads off to Ferrari. And of course, he had a really strong Constructors' Championship between McLaren and Ferrari. Now, unfortunately for Ferrari, Charles Leclerc had to start in the back and he put up a really, really great charge. Early in the race, Lando Norris put up an absolute dominating clinic. Carlos Sainz in the middle portion then was trying to run Lando Norris down, but unfortunately Carlos did not have enough time to get up there and the tires started going away. Charles Leclerc was starting to run Carlos Sainz down near the end of the event, and he had hard charging Lewis Hamilton on the fresher tires as well. But basically a massive lead for Lando Norris would come. He'd pull out to a pretty major lead, and coming out the final corner in the final race of the year, Lando Norris would give McLaren the Constructors' Championship for the first time since 1998, and Lando Norris picks up, I believe, his third or fourth Formula One win of 2024 in his Formula One career. Lando Norris absolutely put up a dominating clinic, and going into 2025, he may be the favorite to win the championship, considering the fact that Red Bull struggled a lot in the second half of this year in the season, even though Max went on to win the title. I think that you're going to have a really strong battle between a lot of guys, and I think the 2025 season is going to be one of the most exciting seasons we have seen in recent years. Congratulations to Lando Norris on winning the race, and congratulations to McLaren on winning the Constructors title for Formula One in 2024. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about the West Coast Hall of Fame for 2025. It was announced earlier today that the 2025 West Coast Hall of Fame people have been announced. The inductees are AJ Allmendinger, Chuck Gurney, Davey Hamilton, Jeff Jefferson, Justin Marks, Boris Said, and Rick Ware. Many names that many of you are going to recognize. AJ Allmendinger, of course, a winner in Champ Car and also IndyCar, also a multi-time winner in the NASCAR Cup Series, has won 819 NASCAR Xfinity Series races and many road course races. A well-deserved nomination, also a Rolex 24 winner as well, and nearly won the Indy 500 in 2013. Chuck Gurney, who I believe is the brother of Dan Gurney, if I'm not mistaken. Davey Hamilton, a lot of success in IndyCar, also a lot of success in off-road racing. Congratulations to him on getting inducted. Justin Marks, car owner now for Trackhouse, but really good on the West Coast. Won a lot of IMSA races back in the day, especially I think for Michael Shank, if I'm not mistaken. So congrats to Justin Marks, who's been an innovator for Trackhouse Racing and brought that team to the next level, which could lead Project 91 to potentially coming back very, very soon as well. Then you got Boris Said. Boris Said, one of the most iconic drivers of NASCAR over the last 20-something years, and success in IMSA, and of course success on road courses. Could have won a few NASCAR Cup road course races in his time. Won a Truck Series race, I believe, in 1997 or 1998 at Sonoma, and also won an Xfinity Series race, of course, in 2010, in a great finish between Max Pappas at the line. And then you have Rick Ware. Say what you want to say about Rick Ware. Rick Ware is iconic to the West Coast, and Rick Ware's done great things with the organization to try to build Ricker Racing up to be a really strong and great organization going into the future. Congratulations to all these names getting inducted in the West Coast Hall of Fame. It's a massive honor, and I think some drivers currently racing right now are probably going to get inducted in the next couple of years, like Kyle Larson probably. I don't know if Kevin Harvick's been inducted, but he should be inducted. I'd have to think Kyle Busch, and Kyle lives in that New York, but kind of lives almost on the West Coast. He's also probably going to get inducted into the West Coast Hall of Fame very, very soon. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Devlin DeFrancesco. As it was announced earlier today that Devlin DeFrancesco will be joining RL Racing full-time in 2025, driving a number 30 car. There have been rumors and speculation about the fact that potentially Devlin DeFrancesco could get the seat. There was talk about Linus Lundqvist getting this ride, and even some other big names like Rinus VeeKay have been linked to this team for 2025. But instead, they gave it to Devlin DeFrancesco. Now, a massive reason why Devlin DeFrancesco is getting this ride for 2025 is the sponsorship and funding. Devlin DeFrancesco brings a lot of funding to the table, which is one of the reasons why he stayed at Andretti for so many years. If I'm going to be real and honest, though, he's not a good replacement for Pietro Fittipaldi. I think he's going to struggle immensely with RL Racing, and I think he's going to be one of the worst drivers on the IndyCar grid. The guy just never really did much. Yes, he had that one really strong race, I think, 2 years ago at Indianapolis, but he fell back throughout the event and just never had the pace to keep up at the end of the race. I really am not expecting much from Devlin. He's not going to do what Christian Lundgaard did at this team for a couple of years, and I certainly don't think he's going to live up to Graham Rahal, and I think that Yuri Vips should have been the other driver behind the wheel of this seat, and I also think Louis Foster is going to outperform Devlin as well. Again, the big reason why Devlin is getting this seat over a guy like Yuri Vips is because he brings sponsorship to the table, and I wish sponsorship was not the main thing that we focus on, but at the same token and same time, if someone brings sponsorship and funding to the table, unfortunately, they're most likely going to be the driver getting behind the wheel of these seats. Do I agree with it? No, but at the same token, same time, funding matters a lot in the sport, and if you've got a lot of sponsorship and funding, you're most likely going to get these seats in NASCAR. I wish he wasn't the driver behind the wheel, believe me, but same token, same time, they chose a driver who brings a lot of sponsorship and funding to the table. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about the ARCA West and East schedules for 2025. As it was announced on Friday that the ARCA West and East schedules have been officially released for 2025. And there were some pretty notable changes coming to the ARCA West and East schedule that I found very, very interesting. Most notably, Colorado National Park, which had been on the ARCA West schedule for many, many years, is back on the schedule, I believe, for the first time since 2019. The most notable change to both schedules, however, is Rockingham being added to the schedule for the ARCA East Series. There will be the main ARCA Series or ARCA East Series that will be down there this upcoming year. You've also got the Xfinity Series and the Truck Series that will be competing on that same weekend as well around Easter weekend. So now you've got a ton of racing if you're planning to go out to Rockingham. And I think the ARCA East Series, which does put on some good racing from time to time, and I do think you're going to see a high car count for that event, especially with Xfinity and truck drivers. Glad to see Rockingham on the ARCA East schedule. Flat Rock Park is back on the schedule. I don't think it was on the schedule the last couple of years. I believe it's on the ARCA East schedule for 2025. So that's some really exciting stuff, and I think the racing at Flat Rock has generally been amazing. And then you've got Phoenix and Bristol being, I believe, the championship races for both series. ARCA West will have basically their championship at Phoenix once again, while Bristol will host the ARCA East championship, which will be a combination race as well with the main ARCA series. We saw, of course, William Swalch win the ARCA East championship after Logan Meserock and Amber Balkan got into each other and unfortunately collected Connor Zilch near the end of the event. But I gotta say the ARCA East and West schedules do look pretty solid in my opinion, and I'm definitely glad to see that we've got the schedules finally out for those. We got our main ARCA schedule a couple weeks ago, I'm pretty sure, so glad to see we're finally starting to get the final schedules out for 2025, and I'm very happy to see we're going to be having some ARCA East and West racing coming up here very, very soon and in the not-so-distant future. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Live Fast Motorsports. As Live Fast Motorsports confirmed in a retrospective tweet from earlier today that they will be returning in 2025 with them making an announcement on their 2025 plans in the not-so-distant future. BJ McLeod, I think, runs that account, said expect some announcements in regards to their 2025 plans very, very soon. Live Fast Motorsports, of course, the last time they ran full-time in the NASCAR Cup Series was 2023, when, of course, they had the 78 charter. They sold that charter off to Spire Motorsports for 2024, so Zane Smith could get a lot of experience. We are expecting that Zane Smith, by the way, will most likely be with Farmer Motorsports for 2025. Now, the big question we're asking is how many races is Live Fast Motorsports going to run in 2025? I would have to think they're going to run the Daytona 500 most likely, unless they change their number for the event, but they're probably going to run the Daytona 500. BJ McLeod always tends to run the bigger events. They're probably going to run some of the road course races. I'd have to think Mexico City is on their itinerary to run. They probably are going to run the Chicago Street Course if they can get a really good road course racer. Maybe somehow find a way to get Josh Bilicki, or maybe find a way to get Connor Zilch to get behind the wheel at this point. Or then we might see them run some of the other super speed races like a Talladega, and maybe they expand their schedule, run half the races. We do know open teams, especially with the charter agreement, are expected to get a major stake or a pretty much bigger stake of the charter pie than they used to get. They're not going to get as little as they used to. They're still not going to get as much as the charter teams, but they will still get more than they have in the past for the open organizations. But I think it's really exciting to see that Live Fast Motorsports is officially coming back for the 2025 season. It was unknown until today that we were going to be seeing them back. Very happy to see that this organization will be returning in 2025. I really do believe that this team can be competitive because they've got some good motors under those cars for 2025. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Ryan Ellis. As it was confirmed on Friday afternoon, Ryan Ellis' number for 2025. The number that Ryan Ellis is going to use for the 2025 season is going to be the number 71 car at DGM Racing. I think this swap from the number 92 car that's been used over the course of the last 4 or 5 years at this organization. And a big reason why they're using number 71 is that is synopsis to the success of Ryan Ellis on the Legends car scene when he drove the number 71 car then. And I also think he used this number using it during late models as well. Ryan Ellis, we talked about this about a month or so ago, but it's confirmed back in October that he will be, of course, going over to DGM Racing full-time in 2025 after being with Alpha Prime Racing for really the last 2 or 3 years, and honestly had an okay year with Alpha Prime Racing in 2024, but he really never set the world on fire like many of us expected him to do with the organization. He was basically outperformed by Brennan Poole throughout the whole entire season. Now, I do think this is a lateral move for him in 2025. I do think realistically he will be a contender for top 20s and probably even top 15s throughout the year. But I think you look at the competition of the NASCAR Xfinity Series. You've got some really big hotshot rookies of Christian Eckes, Connor Zilisch, Carson Quaffle, obviously Daniel Dye, Nick Sanchez, Taylor Gray, of course William Sawalch, and a lot of other big names that are joining the series this year. You've got other people like Justin Allgaier, Austin Hill, who we're going to talk about here in just a short little bit. But I think them bringing back the number 71, though, is really cool. And it went from basically not being in NASCAR really much at all over the last couple years to now, and within a couple years span, being used in Cup, Xfinity, and trucks. We do know Roger will be back in the 71 truck, by the way, for Spire. That's the number he will most likely use for 2025. But it's pretty cool to see that Ryan Ellis will have the number 71 truck and a 71 number once again for the 2025 NASCAR season. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about the 2024 Snowball Derby. So this past weekend, you had a couple major events that took place. In St. Louis, my home city, we had, of course, the Gateway Dirt at the Dome, and Brendan Shepard went on to win the main late model event. But across the country in Pensacola, Florida, for the 57th time, we had the Snowball Derby. This race, in my opinion, was very intriguing. There were a couple cautions early in the event for Connor Jones and a couple other drivers. There was a pileup that took place on lap number 85 with multiple drivers involved, including Connor Jones, and I believe also Caden Quaffle got caught up in the incident. I believe Caden Lasevich also was caught up in the incident as well. The two main players most of the race were Caden Honeycutt and Ty Majeski. Ty Majeski had the best long-run car without question, while Caden Honeycutt had the best short-run car throughout the whole entire event. And it continued to be domination for Ty Majeski. However, there will be a late race yellow that would come out with around 25 laps to go for Noah Gragson, who spun off potential some contact, I believe, from Michael Hine. I can't remember exactly who was behind Noah Gragson, but he got dumped coming to around 25 laps to go. Because Ty Majeski's car was not good on the short run, they tried to adjust the car, and it really never worked out for him. At the end, it would come down between Caden Honeycutt and Stephen Nasse, who actually had crossed the finish line first a couple years ago in the Snowball Derby, but unfortunately, because of inspection rules, he unfortunately got his win taken away. Stephen Nasse was gaining a ton of ground on Caden Honeycutt at the end, and it looked like he was going to run him down before the checker flag took place. Going to the white flag, Caden Honeycutt had about a 0.3 of a second lead over Stephen. Stephen going to the final corner sent it there, but it would not be enough. And coming off the corner, Caden Honeycutt would come off the corner in his first or second attempt at the Snowball Derby, picks up his first ever Snowball Derby victory. What a big win for Caden Honeycutt. I've praised Caden Honeycutt on this channel quite a few times because I believe that Caden Honeycutt is someone who can absolutely wheel a race car and take equipment to the absolute best and the next level. And I think Caden Honeycutt in 2025 in the Craftsman Truck Series is going to be an absolute major threat throughout the 2025 calendar year. I think he's one of the best young talents we have seen come up to the ranks. He's not the best prospect. He's not up there with guys like Zane Smith and Connor Zilisch and Christian Eckes, but he's probably in that next group, but he's kind of close to being in that top group. I'm excited to see what he can do with Nice Motorsports this year. He's, by the way, running, I believe, a winged outlaw race, I'm pretty sure, doing some late model outlaw racing on dirt this weekend as well. So this guy is a true heart-to-heart racer. I'm excited to see what he can do in 2025. Congratulations to Caden Honeycutt on winning his first ever Snowball Derby. Hoping in the future, though, we see Ty Majeski get another Snowball Derby, and maybe we'll also see Stephen Nasse finally get that elusive Snowball Derby that he's been working for the last 15 or 16 years in late model racing. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Drew Blickensderfer. Now, Noah Gragson recently did a one-on-one with Matt Weaver over the weekend, I believe on Wednesday or Thursday. And Noah Gragson would kind of talk a little bit about the lawsuit, which, trust me, we're going to get into here in just a short little bit. But he also did confirm some other stuff in regards to his 2025 year. He did not confirm the number that he will be using for 2025. However, there's been a lot of speculation and rumors that Noah Gragson is going to drive the number 4 car in 2025, renumbering, I believe, the number 36 to the number 4 car for the 2025 calendar year. He also confirmed that many of the people from the number 10 car from Stuart Haas Racing have joined him over at Front Row Motorsports in 2025. And it was also confirmed that Drew Blickensderfer is going to be the crew chief for Noah Gragson in 2025. Drew Bugazerver has been working with Noah Gragson over the last year or so, and of course is at Stewart Haas Racing for the last couple years, I believe, since 2022. But this is also a major homecoming, of course, for Drew Bugazerver, because remember, a couple years ago, back in 2021, he was a crew chief for Michael McDowell from around 2019 up until the 2021 season. And in that time, Michael McDowell, of course, won the Daytona 500. And he had some really strong runs early in the season and was again inside the top 20 in points throughout much of the regular season. Drew, of course, left in 2022 to join up with Eric Almirola. So this is kind of like a full circle thing for Drew Bugazerver for 2025. I really think that Drew and Noah have had a really good working relationship. You look how strong they were early in the season. And Noah Gragson and Drew were very, very competitive in the early portion of the 2024 year. And I think this team is going to be really strong in 2025. Now, obviously, with the lawsuit going on at the moment, there's definitely some distractions there. We know, of course, there's talk of them getting a third car for Zane Smith for 2025, but that still needs to be confirmed at this point. But the lawsuit's kind of holding that up from getting announced. But I think that Drew Bugazerver and Noah Gragson are going to gel exceptionally once again because these two work so well together in 2024. And I think you're going to see this pair continue to get much better, show more continuous pace and speed. I'm really excited to see these two work together throughout the 2025 season. And I think Noah Gragson could be a borderline playoff contender as these two will have a really good chance to gel and pair up once again in the 2025 calendar year and season. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Jordan Anderson Racing. Now, I did a video covering this on the channel on Friday, but it was announced on Friday morning that Jordan Anderson Racing has officially announced their 2025 NASCAR Xfinity Series driver lineup. And their lineup is certainly interesting for 2025. Jeb Burton is back behind the wheel of the number 27 car for Jordan Anderson Racing in 2025, while Blaine Perkins will leave RSS Racing to drive the number 31 car for Jordan Anderson Racing in 2025, replacing Parker Retzlaff. Parker Retzlaff is heavily rumored, of course, at the moment to go to potentially Alpha Prime Racing or potentially head over to Spire Motorsports in the Craftsman Truck Series, by the way. But let's get back to this lineup for Jordan Anderson Racing. Let's begin by talking about Jeb Burton. Jeb Burton is probably the better of these two drivers. He, of course, has two NASCAR Xfinity Series wins, both of them coming on super speedways at Talladega Super Speedway. And we know that Jeb Burton had a pretty underwhelming season in 2024. So he's looking to definitely turn it around in 2025. And I do think he has a really solid chance and a good opportunity to turn the season around. Though I think there's a lot of really good competition in the Xfinity Series this upcoming season. I really do think that Jeb Burton has potential to get this season rolling. We'll see what he can do with this team in 2025. The guy in the 31, though, Blaine Perkins, I question this move. And the only reason I think that this move is really happening for 2025 is because he's bringing a lot of sponsorship and funding to the table. Blaine Perkins had a lot of funding, of course, working over at RSS Racing in 2024. And I think that's one of the reasons why he's getting behind the wheel of this car, because it was just based off of talent. This is a massive downgrade from Parker Retzlaff. Parker Retzlaff won multiple poles with Jordan Anderson Racing, and there were a couple times throughout 2024 where I feel like that Parker Retzlaff had chances and opportunities to go to victory lane. I'm not expecting that from Blaine. Blaine has only had one top 10 finish in around 75 to 76 NASCAR Xfinity Series starts. Now, granted, it has not been in top tier equipment, but he's basically in the same equipment that Matt DiBenedetto was in. And by the way, he basically took over being the last driver full-time at points once Hailie Deegan lost her ride with AM Racing. So that says a lot about Blaine. He's one of the few guys that didn't even score a single top 10. Like I said, Matt DiBenedetto outperformed him in less races. And there were other drivers like Kyle C2 who did better than him. So I really think that Blaine is going to struggle quite a bit throughout 2025. Now let's get back to the other thing is Anthony Alfredo, because there was talk about Anthony Alfredo maybe going over to Jordan Anderson Racing for the 2025 year. There's been some new rumors coming out that potentially he could be headed to Young's Motorsports next year in the NASCAR Xfinity Series. Again, it might be with the 42 team. We still don't know if Leland Honeyman is going back to the team, or they could be expanding perhaps, which I don't think that team, no offense, is truly ready to expand at this time. But I do think that Jordan Anderson Racing is taking a little bit of a step backwards with their lineup. I feel like if he had a lineup with Jeb Burton, Anthony Alfredo, I think he would actually have a lateral lineup and a pretty solid lineup. Because let's be real, Jordan Anderson Racing had a pretty abysmal and not great season. I don't think this lineup is really going to help anything at this point. I really think this lineup is pretty mediocre for the organization. I'm not expecting much from Jordan Anderson Racing in the 2025 NASCAR Xfinity Series season. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Sammy Smith. Now, we did a video covering this on the channel earlier today, but it was confirmed earlier today that Sammy Smith will be returning to Junior Motorsports in 2025, driving a number 8 car. But the big news coming out of this is the fact that he's bringing back the iconic number 8 font that Dale Jr. used to use in the NASCAR Busch Series at a time when it was called that, and also, of course, when he drove for DEI in the Cup Series from 2001 to 2007. Let's begin by talking about the number 8 iconic font coming back. This font is absolutely iconic. One of the most iconic fonts we have ever seen in NASCAR competition ever. It's up there as one of the kind of fonts that you look at and you're like, yeah, this font is something that we remember for a very long time. Dale Jr.'s obviously been trying to fight to get the trademark for the last year or so when the trademark went up for sale, and that's a massive reason why Dale Jr. was able to get the iconic number 8 font. Now, it does look like there's another big announcement coming at some point later this morning in regards to potentially maybe throwback coming down the road. Maybe we're going to get a Budweiser throwback, perhaps. That could certainly be a possibility. But the other side of this is that Sammy Smith, like I said, will be back with Junior Motorsports for the 2025 season. Now, Sammy Smith had an okay year in 2024. He picked up a win at Talladega Superspeedway and did make the round of 8. However, he only had 8 top 5s, but he did have 17 top 10s. Sammy Smith was kind of mediocre throughout the 2024 season. And I'm really think that going into 2025, he is the weak link of this organization. You've got Justin Allgaier, who's coming in as the defending champion. Justin Allgaier is already one of the favorites to go back-to-back and win his second straight championship. And we think he's a guy that can win multiple races in a season, and he only has 30 career NASCAR Xfinity Series wins at this point. He's going to be a championship contender. You've also got Carson Quaffle, who's driving a number 1 car in 2025. Carson Quaffle, someone who I'm expecting to be really strong on the intermediate tracks, and especially at the short tracks. Carson Quaffle is a really strong short track racer, and I really believe that Carson Quaffle is going to have a very strong and great season with Junior Motorsports in 2025. And then you have Connor Zillage. Need I to say anything else about Connor? He is one of the best young talents we have seen in recent years. Of course, won his Xfinity Series debut at Watkins Glen, but he also won the Rolex 24. He's won the Sebring 12 Hours in the LMP2 class. He's also won some other major events. He almost won the ARCA East Championship. He's won some Cars Tour races, I believe, in 2024. He's had a very strong season, and he's already one of the favorites to win the Xfinity Series title for 2025. And then you've got Sammy Smith. Look, I think it's really cool to bring in the iconic number 8 font back. I don't think there's any denying that. However, I think there's kind of a little bit of disappointment to see that they're not moving some people around. I think it would have made a lot of sense for Sammy Smith to drive the 1 and maybe put Carson Quaffle behind the wheel of the number 8 car for next year. Why? Because I think Carson Quaffle is going to do a lot better in that number 8 car than Sammy Smith is going to do. I'm not saying Sammy Smith is going to suck by any stretch of imagination, but I'm not really expecting Sammy to get into that car and be a massive and strong contender throughout 2025. So I think Sammy Smith will have some success in that car throughout the year. I think he will be good at super speedways, but I really don't think he is going to be a threat at any other type of track. Maybe outside of short tracks like Phoenix and Martinsville, maybe that's a type of track where he can run extremely well. But realistically, I think Sammy Smith is the weak link at Junior Motorsports, in my opinion. No disrespect to him. I just think that while he does have talent and he does have potential, I still think he hasn't really showed it or proved it at this point. I really hope he can run a lot better because I think Sam Mayer was better with that equipment this past year. And Brandon Jones, while he wasn't great, he wasn't far off Sammy Smith at times throughout this year. So I really hope Sammy Smith can run really strong. And I think he's going to have a lot of pressure on him because he's driving that number 8 iconic font. And I think a lot of people are going to be rooting for him throughout the 2025 NASCAR season. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the first of three major stories in today's episode, as we're talking about the 2311 and Front Row Motorsports NASCAR lawsuit once again. As it was reported earlier this evening, very late evening going into the next day, that NASCAR has officially filed their response to 2311 and Front Row. Their response was due today. Obviously, Front Row in 2011 had basically issued, I believe, their response not too long ago. And NASCAR also had been planning to try to go ahead and drop the lawsuit very, very recently. Continuing on, NASCAR in the response said that 2011 and Front Row had manufactured new evidence that they brought into play and felt like the evidence that they had received to the judge was not enough for them to be able to get basically an injunction, to preliminary injunction, to compete as charter teams for 2025. They also talked about the facts surrounding Tyler Reddick. There had been some speculation a couple weeks ago when the lawsuit was going on. It was mentioned, I believe, by the lawyer Jeffrey Kessler, who, of course, is working with the teams. He did mention that Tyler Reddick is free to leave because I believe Tyler Reddick is under contract with the charter stuff. I think he's required under his contract to basically have a chartered car for the upcoming season, because Tyler Reddick is still under the old contract stuff, while many drivers under the new contract, like Bubba Wallace, who will not be going anywhere. Same thing for Riley Herbst, who we'll get to here in just a minute. Now, obviously, I don't think Tyler Reddick is leaving 2311 Racing, by the way. There was some speculation about that, but you look at the teams that are out there, and really there's not a lot of great organizations out there to go with, and most of the Cup Series teams are filled up. He's not going to obviously go back to RCR, who, trust me, we're going to talk about here very, very shortly, but Tyler Reddick basically could leave the team if he wanted to, if there isn't a charter part of it. And finally, the arbitration stuff. This is surrounding Stewart-Haas Racing. NASCAR basically says they're not going to be giving them the Stewart-Haas Racing charters unless they completely drop the lawsuit, that being 2311 and Front Row Motorsports. We've been expecting this response by NASCAR. Now, it took them a very long time to respond, and it took them almost till midnight Eastern Standard Time to get their official response. Obviously, here's what's going on. 2011 Front Row are asking for a preliminary injunction so they can compete as charter teams for the 2025 year. Last week, NASCAR, like I mentioned, basically filed a thing so they can completely drop the lawsuit and end the lawsuit completely and basically go ahead and win the lawsuit as a whole, which I don't think anybody was surprised at the moment. Meanwhile, I have 2011 and Front Row who are trying to get a preliminary injunction so they can compete as charter teams for the 2025 NASCAR Cup Series season. And you look at the stuff that's going on. Obviously, we know that they're expanding to 3-car teams. Both organizations, Front Row, has still not announced Sammy Smith at this time in the 3rd car, but we got Todd Gillen and Noah Gragson, who, of course, are joining up with Front Row. And then, of course, you do have the 3 drivers at 2311, Bubba Wallace, and, of course, Tyler Reddick, and absolutely Riley Herbst, as well as behind the wheel of the 35. There has been chatter that 2011 could also run a 4th car for the 2025 season, potentially with guys like Corey Heim, maybe Carlos Kurt Busch, whoever knows, maybe also Kamui Kobayashi as well. But they were looking to run a 4th car in the Daytona 500 as well for Martin Truex Jr., but with the lawsuit going on currently at the moment, that has hurt that chance and opportunity for 2011 to get a 4th car out for Martin Truex Jr. We still do expect, though, that Martin will be competing in the Daytona 500 with an organization for 2025, though that organization has still not been named at this moment and point. As for the lawsuit at this point, look, I think that both sides have presented very, very good cases and really strong arguments. I think the teams have presented a really solid argument throughout the lawsuit, while I think that NASCAR has also put out a very solid and pretty strong response on their end as well. If you want my opinion, the longer this lawsuit goes, the more likely that NASCAR is going to win the lawsuit. As this gets dragged out more and more and as time progresses, I think 2011 and Front Row continue to lose more and more of a shot of winning the lawsuit. As much as I think many of us want 2011 and Front Row to win the lawsuit as a whole, for the sport to be in a much better position, in a much better direction, I just think it's going to be much tougher for both 2011 and Front Row to go ahead and win the lawsuit. Again, I want to see 2011 and Front Row win to make the sport better for the business model. But I think it's becoming much more difficult for them to do that, and I think it's going to be a lot harder for them to win this lawsuit. As more information does come out from the lawsuit, we'll discuss it here live. Obviously, the response has finally come out from NASCAR. We don't even know when the court date is at this time for them to get the preliminary injunction set. If they win the preliminary injunction case, the lawsuit continues. If not, we could see the case get dismissed and maybe the lawsuit be gone as a whole. But as of right now, we do have finally the response from NASCAR on 2011 and Front Row's lawsuit currently at the moment. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the first of two major stories in today's episode as we're talking about Richard Childress Racing. Now, Richard Childress Racing earlier today made a lot of announcements for the 2025 season in regards to their Cup program and their Xfinity Series program. Let's begin with the crew chief side of things. Andy Street, who's been the crew chief for Austin Hill since 2022, will move up to the NASCAR Cup Series. The crew chief, the number 33 Cup car, in 2025. He's also expected to be a part-time crew chief in an Xfinity RCR car in 2025 as well. Chad Haney, who I think has been working with RCR over the course of the last couple of years, will move to work with Austin Hill as his crew chief for the 2025 calendar year, while Danny Stockman will continue working with Jesse Love in 2025. Industry getting promotion is something I did not expect. Austin Hill and Andy Street have worked together exceptionally well throughout the 2024 year, and really over the last couple years especially. We know Austin Hill made the Final Four this year, and Austin Hill's won like 10 or 11 NASCAR Xfinity Series races at this point, most of those, of course, coming on super speedways. But I think for him to get a promotion to the NASCAR Cup Series tells me they really like Andy Street a lot over there. As for his replacement, I think this could hurt Austin Hill for sure in performance because you're not going to have that built-in chemistry. I know Chad has been working over at RCR over the course of the last couple of years, but I think that not having that built-in chemistry that you really need for a lot of success, I think that is going to hurt the team a little bit over at that number 21 car. And same thing goes for Danny Stockman, even though I do think that this combination of Danny Stockman and Jesse Love was very impressive last year. One of the teams I was not expecting to make the playoffs in 2024 that actually ended up, in fact, making the playoffs in 2024. I think this pairing right here of Danny Stockman and Jesse Love is going to work out exceptionally in 2025. But the most significant news that came out of this is the fact that RCR is going to field a third Cup car, an Xfinity Series car, in 2025. We've been hearing some rumors around some drivers, one of those being Chandler Smith. Chandler Smith has been linked to a third RCR car for the 2025 season. We're going to talk about Chandler a little bit more broadly here in just a short little bit, but his name has been linked to that third RCR car. Other guys that have been linked to that RCR car, Austin Hill, of course. Austin Hill, of course, who did work in the number and made some select Cup Series starts in 2024 for the team, running 5 or 6 races with United Rentals as a sponsor. He, of course, did work with this car in 2024, but did struggle quite a bit. There is also a potential possibility as well that Jesse Love may be making his NASCAR Cup Series debut in this car in 2025 as well. NASCAR Minnesota had reported a couple months ago, or about a month or so ago, that most likely Jesse Love will make his NASCAR Cup Series debut. But one driver that we're also likely going to see in this car for 2025 is going to be Will Brown. Will Brown has been in talks and conversations to drive in the number 33 car for 2025 in that number 33 in a couple races. We do think COTA is likely going to be one of the races he enters. And I would have to think a race like Sonoma could be another one to watch, or the Chicago Street Course as well. But I also think Mexico City is also a major possibility for the 2025 season as well. And then you got to look at the Xfinity program. Like I said, there is talk that they are going to run a third Xfinity car as well for 2025. And like I said, Chandler Smith has been linked to that program. But I also would have to think that you may see Kyle Busch make a couple select Xfinity Series starts. Kyle Busch actually did, in fact, make an Xfinity Series start in 2024 in the number 33 car with Keith Rodden as the crew chief. And Kyle Busch, while he did not end up winning the race, was still very competitive and finished inside the top 5 and led quite a few laps in that number 33. So I do think you're going to see a third RCR car for 2025 in Xfinity as well. But overall, looking at RCR, This team, while it's exciting, they are going to have a third car in the Cup Series next year. I'm not excited for this team if I'm going to be real and honest. I really don't see much innovation going on over at RCR right now. I think they've really made a lot of in-houses moves. Granted, they've brought Richard Boswell to work with Austin Dillon and Johnny Klossenmeyer, but they haven't made the massive major hirings that they promised a lot of people outside of the people at Stewart-Haas Racing. Many of the people that are moving up or making changes with the team already were part of the RCR organization as a whole. So I think that's one thing that isn't really being talked about as much. And that leads to the Kyle Busch side of things. What if Kyle Busch struggles a little bit in 2025? Could this lead to Kyle Busch potentially leaving the team at the end of the year? Because remember, Kyle Busch, from what I understand, is going to be in a contract year with Richard Childress Racing. And if Kyle Busch does end up struggling a lot throughout 2025 and doesn't perform good and struggles like he did in 2024, Kyle Busch could be a free agent. I would not be surprised or shocked if that does end up happening. Now, obviously, Kyle Busch wants to do better and wants to get better. They were doing a Cheddar's Q&A very recently, and they do want to improve that number 8 car for the 2025 year, which I think a lot of people think there's a good chance they can definitely improve that car throughout the year. I just have my worries about this organization, and I do worry that this team may struggle a little bit next year. As for RCR fielding a third car, it is exciting for sure. There's going to be more cars on the grid, more open cars in the field, the better. I would have to think that announcement is coming very, very soon on the drivers, especially with a certain driver who we're about to talk here. It's good to see, though, like I said, and I'm excited to see this team fielding a third car for next year. I'm just not exactly sure if this car will be very fast and strong throughout the 2025 NASCAR Cup Series season. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the final major story of today's episode as we're talking about Chandler Smith. Now, we've talked a lot about Chandler Smith on this channel because there's been a lot of talk and speculation surrounding Chandler Smith over the course of the last couple weeks and couple months. Early in the season or late in 2024, a lot of rumors began to swirl that Chandler Smith was not going to have a ride in NASCAR in 2025, and we've been hearing rumors that Chandler Smith would not be returning to Joe Gibbs Racing for the 2025 year. Well, it was confirmed in an article by Matt Weaver from Sportsdot, and it was confirmed at the Snowball Derby as well, that he will not return to Joe Gibbs Racing in 2025. However, he does have a seat for 2025. Now, let's begin by talking about the JGR stuff. This is not surprising or shocking. We have covered this story on this channel quite a bit over the course of the last couple months, but never got official confirmation on it. They're filled up over at Joe Gibbs Racing for 2025 right now. You've obviously got William Swalch, who is joining the team to drive the number 18 car for the 2025 calendar year. You've also got Taylor Gray, who is joining to drive the number 54 car for Joe Gibbs Racing in 2025 as well. After a pretty solid year in the Truck Series and making his way up, he will also have Jason Ratcliffe as a crew chief as well. And then you have Brandon Jones, who we've heard might be driving the number 20 car next year, even though there is a chance he could also be driving the number 19 car in 2025 as well. We do know that Joe Gibbs is going to run a fourth car in 2025, but that is going to be an all-star car, probably for people like Mark Truex Jr., probably Ryan Truex, Ty Gibbs, maybe Eric Almirola as well. So there wasn't any room for Chandler Smith to find a ride for 2025, at least at Joe Gibbs Racing. It is a shame to see he's not back at Joe Gibbs Racing because I think that Chandler Smith had a very, very good season with Joe Gibbs Racing. I think it was one of the fastest cars throughout the 2024 year. He ended up, of course, while not making it to the championship 4, he did make the round of 8 and picked up 2 wins early in the season throughout the first 10 events. He won at Richmond and also, of course, did pick up a win earlier in the season at Phoenix Raceway. But then, while he did not win a race, he still was one of the more consistent drivers throughout the 2024 season and was very impressive on the track with an average finish being one of the best in the field and being one of the more consistent drivers in the second half of the season. But again, it all comes down to sponsorship and funding, and the drivers, of course, going over to Joe Gibbs Racing are bringing a lot of sponsorship and funding to the table. But the good news is for Chandler Smith fans is that he will have a ride for 2025. Now, the big question is, what team could he be going to? Well, beginning with that, he will be announcing those plans for 2025 probably in the next couple weeks, probably before Christmas time is most likely when we're finally going to get official confirmation on Chandler Smith's plans for 2025. It's obviously not going to be Jordan Anderson Racing. We talked about them. They've got their plans set and confirmed for 2025. He's not going to the Truck Series for teams like Spire. He's probably not going to Junior Motorsports next year, even though there's been rumors going around about that. The team that many people have been speculating over the course of the last year or so is a team we just talked about a little bit ago, and that is Richard Childress Racing. RCR, like I mentioned, they are going to run a third Cup car in the 2025 season, and Chandler Smith's name has been heavily linked over to that program for 2025. And I think that Chandler Smith would be a really good driver to fit. Number one, he could make some select NASCAR Xfinity Series appearances, which I think him being an RCR car, I think he will do better than Austin Hill and Jesse Love in all honesty. Maybe not on the super speedways, but on the short tracks and maybe road courses too, and basically the intermediates as well. I think that he could definitely lead this team to a lot of success. But also, this could lead to him getting some NASCAR Cup Series appearances in 2025 as well. Like I talked about very shortly earlier, we talked about the fact that they're going to run the number 33 car in the NASCAR Cup Series once again. And I do believe that you're going to see him behind the wheel of that car in a few select races. I would have to think he is going to get a majority of those races. If not, run maybe 10, 11 of the races, because we're hearing they're going to run around 18 to 20 races in 2025. Does Chandler Smith fit the mold at RCR, though? That is a pretty big question. Obviously, both Chandler Smith and Austin Hill are from Georgia, and Chandler Smith is someone that doesn't always like to take responsibility for his mistakes and can sometimes be a little bit whiny, like Austin Hill has been in the past. But I think at the end of the day, Chandler Smith is a driver, does deserve to be full-time. Unfortunately, it won't be a full-time seat, most likely, though, for Chandler Smith, unless he got a charter somehow to run a third full-time car, which there's been a lot of speculation that they are going to run a third full-time car in Cup. There was talk about it earlier this year, even though I still think it's very unlikely at this point that you will see Chandler Smith full-time in any series next year, though he couldn't have not been racing at all, working his parents' construction company. But it's at least good to see that Chandler will be racing in NASCAR in 2025. Well, it is a shame to see it's probably, like I said, not going to be full-time. I think the most important thing is at least for 2025, we are going to see Chandler Smith in some sort of racing capacity. And I think RCR is not a bad team to go to, right? I think at least their Xfinity program is really, really strong. Jesse Love had a pretty strong year. And Austin Hill, well, he's probably going to struggle a little bit more with not having Andy Street up on the pit box. I really think that those two, the new guy working with him, could lead quite a bit of success. And I do think that Chandler going into a third car with Andy Street being the crew chief of that car, I think definitely does make quite a bit of sense. So I really hope we can see a ton of success for him next year. I think Chandler Smith has a lot of potential to be a future Cup Series champion if things could go his way. I think he also could win a lot of Cup races if things go right. Yes, RCR as a Cup Series program has been struggling a little bit, but there's no denying that Xfinity program they have right now is a program that can be very, very successful. So definitely, like I said, I'm very excited to see what Chandler Smith can do with this team for 2025, and I'm also glad to see that Chandler will have a seat in the NASCAR Cup Series, most likely RCR, even though it's disappointing to see him not back at Joe Gibbs Racing. It's not the most shocking thing when he's got a right to potentially join up in the Cup Series in 2025. So, that is good for today's long NASCAR news and motorsports news episode. I want to thank you guys for watching. Please subscribe to the channel, notifications on, so if I win a video, it does go live on my channel. Follow me on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, and support me on Patreon as well. Let's go below that and comment your thoughts below on today's episode. Where do you think Chandler Smith's headed next year? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And more thoughts about all the stories to talk about today on the channel, including the 2011 in front row lawsuit, and also the news on RCR adding a third Cup car. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. There probably won't be any more videos dropping today on the channel unless some major news breaks. Tomorrow will likely be the Trackhouse Racing preview. Thursday, I may have something really cool coming out on the channel perhaps. And then Friday, of course, we'll probably have a NASCAR news video dropping once again. This weekend, you're probably going going to see potentially Xfinity Series playoff predictions. There may also be the Cup where I rank everyone where I think they'll finish in the standings. And I've got some other really cool content dropping really soon as we close out the remainder of the year. And I've also got a Kyle Busch video coming out soon, and probably a video on Shane Van Gisbergen coming out very soon as well. Probably talk about Kyle Larson, Chase Elliott, Bubba Wallace, Kurt Busch, all those people, you name it, throughout the rest of the remainder of the offseason. So anyways, like I said, I want to thank you guys for watching today's episode, and I'll see you guys next time for more great, awesome NASCAR content and other motorsports content on the channel like this. Take care, everybody.